Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Women on Top podcast. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and with over 15 years of business experience, I became truly passionate about finding ways to support and hear from way more women. And what we know to be true is that women thrive when they are in their favorite position, on top in business, in relationships, in personal growth, and on top in being real and authentic to who the hell they are. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the Women on Top podcast. Welcome back to the Women on Top, everybody. I am so thrilled that you're here with us, and I have an incredible guest for us here today. I have Naama Zusman, who is a licensed life, career, and health coach who really helps people navigate major transitions in their life and careers with clarity and confidence. And I personally really have been drawn to her work as well. She empowers clients to move kind of from this feeling of this stuck energy to really helping them embrace their authentic selves and helps them build their life that's aligned with their true values. And I think that that's so important, especially in today's world. So I'm thrilled to welcome her today. You know, you are really gifted in helping people who are going through these major shifts or transitions and big changes. And I believe it might have started out with you navigating some of your own big career transitions. So can you tell us a little bit about your own personal journey?
Yes. So career transitions, or do you want me to go way back, like in time?
Let's go back. Like, where did it all begin? What was kind of the starting point for you?
I guess like the reason why I'm saying this is because when I work with clients, I work with concepts that is called, like, I call it the breadcrumbs, where I feel like we all have these little breadcrumbs that are like the clues that life gives us about what's next or what we're called to do or what's meant for us. And so I think that, like some of those breadcrumbs in retrospect started way earlier before even thinking about these kind of careers, right? So I think it's always really hard to like pinpoint the exact moment when something happens, because actually I think that things are working constantly, like whether we're aware of it or not. So hopefully it makes sense. And I think like maybe everyone who's listening can also think about things in their lives that, like, looking back in retrospect, they can recognize, oh yeah, like that was always there, or there was that teacher who told me to do this and this, or yeah. So I think like that's kind of a little bit of I guess a hint to the kind of part of the work that I do is really kind of helping and encouraging people to pick up the breadcrumbs, the ones that were already kind of laid from the past and the ones that are present right now, and just to being more like pay attention to them.
Yeah.
So career-wise, I started my career journey in art. So I studied fine arts, and I was pretty good at it. Yeah, I graduated with honors, first in class. I was nominated for several awards. Like I was studying in the Netherlands, and I went to Prague for an exhibition, and like things that I think every aspiring artist would want early on in their journey. And I think that while I was like very much excited about all these things, as anyone would, I also felt like deep inside that like it's more my ego that's happy about it. And I wasn't really sure, because I felt like, ooh, now that it's like, people told me like I'm a promising artist, and that like, you feel like you're kind of pushed into a direction that I was very much participating in it, right? Like I was fully engaged in it, but there was a part of me that knew that this is not really my path for many reasons. I think the main thing is that I felt like I was kind of playing a role, if that makes sense. Like I need to wear certain things and I need to behave in a certain way. and I need to put on this like role of an artist. And I think that's how it felt to me, because that wasn't my path. For someone else, they
Right.
wouldn't feel it because that's their authentic path. So that's kind of when I started realizing I'm not sure this is for me. And it took a few months where I was totally in the like trenches and in the limbo and in between and going back and forth, and a lot of crying and a lot of, the discomfort of not knowing what I want to do. And also, like, I invested 4 years of my life, even more, because to get accepted to art school or design, you have to like invest a whole year just preparing your portfolio and everything. And then like there are a few phases of getting into it. So, a lot of like sleepless nights and a lot of energy that went into that path. And then like, being involved in all these exhibitions and feeling like this path is already laid for you. But I just felt like this is not right. And then I kind of went back to the drawing board. I was always interested in yoga. I was practicing yoga even before I studied art. I wanted to become a yoga teacher before I went and studied art, but my mom was like, you need to get a degree. Yoga teaching is not like a real job. And, this is like almost 2 decades ago. So I think also yoga wasn't as, you know, mainstream as it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I went back to the drawing board. There was like some kind of synchronicity there as well, where I got like, an email about a yoga teacher training in Miami. And I was like, ooh, this sounds like really exciting. And I kind of started following that path and the breadcrumbs, which eventually led me also into coaching.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. Such a journey. And I can't imagine the emotions that you went through when you realized, gosh, this maybe isn't aligned for me. All of this work, all of this time and money pursuing art. So, what were some of the things that you explored in order to follow the breadcrumbs? Because it's such a tough journey, I think, for a lot of us that feel very confused, maybe about, okay, I know this doesn't feel quite right, but how do I know what is right and figuring that out? So I'd love to hear your process.
I think that what a lot of us are missing, and that's kind of what I try to also bring in my work, is a curious, experimental approach, like playing, like trying things, and not sitting like, yes, I did have a period of like sitting on the sofa crying and feeling sorry for myself and like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And there was that. And I think that's okay, because that's part of the process. And like, you're slowly like letting something go. So you're kind of processing that also. But then, at some point, I felt like, okay, I have to stop feeling sorry for myself, because this is not helpful. And I felt like I'm just going to do things that make me happy.
Mm.
So I would wake up every day, do yoga, meditate, journal. Like I would just do things that felt really joyful. And then like I said, I got that email about the yoga teacher training, and that was already kind of in my head somehow, because that's what I wanted to do before going to art school. And the opportunity was kind of quite like perfectly aligned in terms of timings. I didn't have anything in that month where the yoga teacher training was. So I felt like that could work in terms of timings. And that also felt like a little bit like a synchronicity, right? When you feel like, oh, it just falls like perfectly. Obviously, it was an investment of money. But I thought also to myself, well, you know what? Like, I don't need to decide now what I'm going to do with my life. And I don't even have to decide, like, am I going to be like a full-time yoga teacher? Am I going to pursue it as like this path? I'm just going to, why don't I sign up for this yoga teacher, do it for myself, teacher training, do it for myself, learn, deepen my practice, and see how I feel when I come back. So I did that. And then I started teaching, and I did art in the meantime. So I was like, there was a period where I was following both paths, and it worked well together. And then like, there was a point I remember where I felt like, okay, I just I'm not interested in art anymore, like in doing it anymore. And there was also in as part of my explorations, I'm like, okay, I still love art, but I just don't want to be an artist. So what else might I do in terms of like, still honoring that passion? So I looked also into becoming a curator, which really appealed to me. It's something that I was always had in mind somewhere. And um it was like the studies were a bit too expensive and was a big commitment, and getting accepted was again like a whole thing. And I didn't feel it made it feel really heavy, and I felt like really tight and rigid.
Yeah.
Like those are the signs, I think, that your intuition is telling you, well, maybe not that. It just felt like doing the whole thing all over again.
Hmm.
And I wasn't that like passionate about it. I think that if you're going to invest quite a lot of time and money and energy on something, especially when it's a second kind of career you're going to do it if you feel really like that pull,
Hmm.
and you need to have that like, yes, I'm going to do it, whatever it takes. But I felt pulled to check. I felt like, oh, I at least want to explore that option. So I did also talk with curators, and like I did some conversations, which is again another thing I encourage clients to do. So I was like also kind of exploring, okay, what would it mean to be a curator? What would it look like? What would it look like day to day? And it didn't really feel like it ticked the boxes. It was more like how I pictured curating in my head
Yeah.
versus what the job is in reality. And I think it's also important to say that, I think that we can all have a lot of parallel careers, like a lot of like things that you can, like a lot of lives we can live. There are a lot of lives that we can live. Like I can see a path where I did go down that road and became a curator, and I think I would have been also happy. It's just not where the stars didn't align in that way. And I think that's part of it, right? It's letting go of that, like, I need to figure that perfect path, that perfect job that will be there for the rest of my life, right? And I just kind of, again, another approach is just like take what's the most accessible for you right now. What's like that kind of low
Hmm.
hanging fruit that you can already try, and it doesn't take a lot of like commitment, and you can see if you like it or not. So I think that's what the yoga teacher training was for me. Like, it felt like a low commitment. I enjoy it. I do it for myself. If it becomes something more than that, it will. If not, that's fine.
Uh, how did you then land on what you're doing now, which is helping people through career transition? Because that's not
Mm.
necessarily tied to yoga. So I'm curious how you got there.
No, and again, so that's kind of, I kept following the breadcrumbs, right? So I started teaching yoga, and I noticed that in what I loved so much about teaching was not as like, I loved teaching the classes, but I actually really loved the conversations after, and what like students will come and ask me questions, and like that part I really loved. And I was teaching. So, and then another synchronicity that happened is that the studio where I was teaching, two of my students approached me and asked me if I would like teach them privately, like 4 or 5 times a week, which is like amazing. I think any yoga teacher would want that opportunity. And it was like, yes, of course, I would do that. And then they were business coaches, like they had their own business coaching school. And I was just like, I loved coming to their house and seeing how they live their life, and like teaching them. And like, I really got to get that exposure to the world of coaching, the kind of state of mind of the people who coach. And I loved like the way they live their lives, the flexibility, like it was really appealing to me. So
Okay.
that was the breadcrumb, right? Like that was like, okay, this is interesting. Something interesting is it feels like a pool again. And then also because I was driving quite a lot, I was looking for what will I do in the car? Because I started getting quite frustrated about all the time I spend in the car. So I started listening to podcasts and started listening to like self-help, personal growth. And I was like, wow, this is just amazing. So this is kind of what got me onto this path. Fast forward, we lived in the Netherlands at the time, and my husband got a job offer in the UK, and he came and shared with me about it, and I was like, first I was like, amazing, congratulations, really happy for you. And then the next moment I was like crying because I realized what it actually meant that he got a job offer in the UK. And I actually felt like, wow, things are really coming together. I'm figuring things out. I am teaching this like private yoga 5 times a week with people I really like and find inspiring. So there was that moment of, okay, we need to make a decision. Are we going to move? We didn't have kids at the time. We didn't really have anything that really ties us to one place. And eventually we decided that we're going to take that leap and give it a try. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, I can feel again like sorry for myself, or feel like become a little bit of a victim of my circumstances. "Ugh, everything is working out now. Why do I have to like start over again?" And I thought like, no, I'm gonna see it as an opportunity. I'm starting like a fresh page. I'm moving to somewhere else. I don't have any commitments yet because obviously it would take time to build maybe like relationship connections, yoga studios, whatever. And I was like, maybe this is the time where I can like go and study again. And that's kind of where I started with coaching, took a coaching training, and then that's where it all started.
Wow. Okay. So you've had a lot of different transitions and life changes, which I'm sure has helped you and in the sense of navigating things with your clients as well. So
Mm.
where do you kind of tend to begin? I'm sure it depends on the person and the situation, but for a woman who's listening in right now that maybe is in a career, or even for myself where kind of trying to figure out what is the thing. And I've kind of gotten tripped up before on, I need to find the thing. Like I need to find this one thing and that's going to make me famous, or that's going to be the thing that, whatever gets me to success, whatever that means. Where do we even begin in that scenario?
I think that it's obviously, like you said, like every person is different and every situation is different. But I think, first of all, I think it's understanding that like in at least in my approach, it's, and obviously everything that I share is through my lens and my perspective. But I think career transitions is like it's an iterative process, and it has to have like these two layers of, yes, like thinking or going inwards and exploring and that side of things. And then it also have to have like the element of actually taking action. Um and so I think that like just knowing that it's going to be like this kind of iterative process where you're like exploring a little bit, going inwards, then taking action, seeing how it feels, what taking like noticing like what lights you up, getting input through that, then again going back to like the drawing board and your journal or whatever, and like doing some more work and then back to action. And I think that's really, really important, that you don't like sit alone in your room and get stuck in like your head, write all the possible careers or jobs, and then like think pros and cons. And it's all a very kind of technical and analytical process. I think that tends to get people stuck. And I think that kind of is a little bit of a recipe to finding yourself in the same situation that you're maybe trying to get away from. And I think another mistake people often do is like they ask themselves, okay, what can I do as a lawyer? Or what can I do as a primary school teacher? And I think that's when then you're kind of going to adjacent careers that are not necessarily what you want. Like if you are in a career transition journey, this is your opportunity, right? Like to reinvent yourself, to do something that you actually want to do. And again, it depends on like the reason why you're going through a career transition. I think like I'm mostly referring to people who want to kind of, were not happy in their current career job
Yeah.
and they want to
Right.
get more meaning out of it or more fulfillment. And so I think it's like, this is your opportunity to really like, the sky's the limit. Start really broad, start big, don't like hold back. And then you can go, back to what makes sense. How can I use my skills and experience and knowledge? Maybe there's an interesting kind of way to bring my skills and knowledge and expertise into something new that I want to do. And so I think that's kind of where we want to start this journey from and approach it from. And it's also like this dance between, yeah, like taking action, being very practical and proactive, and then really paying attention to gut, to what your body is telling you, right? Does it light you up? Do you feel drawn towards something? Are you feeling curious? Does your body feel open and expansive? Do you feel closed and restricted and like rigid?
Gosh, so many good points here. I'm wondering, because sometimes I think there's a tendency for people, and myself included, to get caught up on this money piece of like, oh gosh, I have to make the same amount of money or more. And for a lot of people, maybe that is true. There's a certain level that they have to reach. And so how do we navigate that? Because and the listeners know I've been through a layoff, and so some of that I really was, I knew it was coming. And so to just provide some context, like I knew it was coming, and I also felt like I was at a point where I was ready for something else at the same time. So I kind of feel like I manifested it in a weird way. And now that
Mm.
I'm here, I'm like, boy, this is interesting. But I also have had this fear around money. And I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to that. So I'm just curious how you help people navigate when they're like, gosh, this all sounds great. I'd love to shoot for the moon and be creative and all of this, but I also have to make ends meet. How do I do that?
Yeah. And obviously, I totally get it. I also live in like the real world and I have a mortgage to pay and I have 2 kids. So I know like we all have those responsibilities, right? And so there's the practical level and then there is the like more mindset and inner work level, right? So on the practical level, there are solutions. And I also always encourage my clients not to quit their job yet. Sometimes they feel like that urgency to quit ASAP because they really can't stand their job. And I always say, and usually like when they reach out for a discovery call or something, I always say like, just try to like, if you can, hold on to it a little bit more, because what happens is that if you don't have a job, and it's not even like, it's that pressure that you put on yourself then to find something as soon as possible. And that pressure doesn't allow you to get really creative and think out of the box. And it's just like you want to find something as soon as possible. So I always encourage to, while you're like in that kind of exploration phase, is to keep your job if possible. And what I find also with clients is that once they start working on this, on like what they want, on their next step, their job becomes more bearable because a few things happen. First of all, they feel better because they know that they're being proactive. They know this is temporary. They know that they're working towards something, a future that's better for them, which makes like the reality a little bit more bearable. The second thing that often happens is that you learn about yourself. Learn that what's your zone of genius versus your zone of excellence. And then you realize that you use most of the skills you use in your day to day are not your best skills actually. And your best skills are not being used enough. They're only being used like once a week or once a few weeks even. And so you start realizing like, oh, it's not me. Like I have not I'm telling myself I'm spoiled or I should be grateful. But actually, it makes sense that I don't like my job. It makes sense this is not a good fit, or it goes against my values, or and I think just like having that feeling seen and understood by kind of yourself and your coach or something like that really helps kind of let go of that maybe guilt that's also there behind sapping your energy. I think keep your job if you can
Yes.
as while you're exploring. Then there are like practical things that you can do, like, start saving money if possible. See where can you cut on your expenses. And also often what happens is in this transition journey is because changing a job is not just changing a job, you're also changing identity, you're shifting, you're evolving. And a lot of times you realize that what you valued then or thought you valued is not what you feel like you want to prioritize right now in your life, or not what you really value. And you realize that you have a lot of clothes in your closet that you don't need anymore, like maybe expensive brands, and maybe you sell them. And like it's all these little things that happen that you also realize that you don't need to have those big expenses.
Yeah.
When I think that so much of our expenses happen when we're not aligned with, our job is not aligned with who we are, or we feel drained, and then we go into like spending money just to feel a bit better about life, that kind of compensation, or I deserve it. And so you start seeing money in a different way when you start realizing. And I think there's also a question I like to ask, which is how much money is enough for me to create the life I love?
Mm,
Because money is also something that, like, society, we are culturally wired to kind of connect that, attach that to our identity. Like how much money is how much you're worthy or something like that.
yeah.
And I think like we have to start separating that from our identity.
Yes.
Mm, And that is hard, right? Like that is hard. If you are, driving a certain car and you have like a certain status that you are holding, and then you are maybe making a career shift and you know that at least for a while, you might be earning a bit less. You might need to let go of some of those status objects,
Yeah.
It's really about starting to explore yourself, your identity, what matters, what you value. Um, and instead of, and I know like it's really easy to say and hard to actually do it, but it's really kind of living from your life from the inside rather than from the outside. We are kind of always, it's almost like we always have this second voice in our head, which is kind of narrating how things look like from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like we have this inner self that's like, I feel really drawn to this, or I feel really excited when I do this, or I feel really lit up by this, and this is where I feel energized. And then there's like the part that's telling the story of how we look like from the outside, and how certain choices might be perceived from the outside.
Mm,
And I think that's where we really kind of start, like we get into trouble, right? Like that's kind of that internal conflict
yeah.
that we can experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm kind of going through that too, because you kind of don't realize how much your identity is wrapped up into a title, or, oh, I've worked for this corporation for this long, or whatever it might be. The money piece too, of course. And I even caught myself just randomly applying for jobs just because it had the salary listed. But then I had somebody ask me, well, does it even sound like a job you really want? And the answer was, no, it doesn't. I just am going through the motions because I think that that's what I should be doing, when really I need to look at it in a different way. You've mentioned a couple of things about identity around zone of genius And I'm wondering if, is there like a simple practice you can kind of share with us that can help women to start to understand their zone of genius?
Gay Hendricks coined the term zone of genius. And basically, he says that there are four zones that we all operate from, which is incompetence, competence, excellence, and genius, right? And so incompetence, it's, we all have those things that we are just not capable of doing. For one person, it would be cooking. For another one, it would be Excel sheets, fixing something, changing that, whatever. Everyone will have those things that they're not really competent in doing, and they will always delegate it to someone else. Then we have the zone of competence, which is like, I can manage to do it if I really need to. I hate doing it. I know I'm not good at this. And like, okay, if there's no other choice, I'll just do it, right? And with the zone of competence, like someone else can do it better than you.
Mm.
Then there is the zone of excellence, which is, that's our like golden cage, right? Or golden handcuffs. Why? Because it's the zone where we really practiced our skills. So our skills are very proficient. We get rewarded for our hard work. So we either get like promoted, or, people tell us that we're really great at what we do. And we get a lot of compliments and a lot of external validation. But we have that feeling. And so, first of all, recognizing, right, like which zone you operate in most of the time. And one of the ways to know you're in your zone of excellence is that kind of inner, like that conflict that you have where you get that external feedback on how like good you're doing, but you're not feeling like at the top. From the outside, it looks like you're at the top, but you don't feel that way. You feel like something's missing. You don't feel like that like sense of achievement, even though you've achieved a lot, right? And so in that zone of excellence, your skills are proficient, you get that validation, but you don't feel that way. And often people stay stuck in it because they tell themselves that they should be grateful. You have a good job, you have a good salary, you're good at what you do, like you should just be grateful for it. You're spoiled for thinking this way. Why can't you just be happy? And so on. And then also, because externally they're so validated for what they do, they think like they're already at the top. So what else is there?
Right.
When they're not aware that there is another zone, which is the zone of genius, right? And the zone of genius is that like place where you are doing the things that are really innate in you, that you are, your gifts. You're using your gifts most of the time, and you are doing it for the greater good. Or, like it doesn't have to be something noble, or like you don't have to save the world for that, but it's just you feel the positive impact it has in whatever way it does. Like you do feel that contribution when you're using your best gifts, your favorite skills, your favorite strength. And that zone of genius is really, it's the intersection between your passions, your gifts, and your purpose, your why. And so how can you start recognizing when you're in your zone of genius? Just start noticing what are the things that you do in your day-to-day, in your job, outside of work, that you feel like in flow, right? Like time goes by and you don't even notice it, right? It's when you really feel like, I always like to call it like effortless effort. You feel like you're pouring a lot of energy, but you don't feel drained at the end of it, right? It's a bit like when you exercise and you feel like you're giving a lot, but then you also feel energized by it.
Yeah.
It's more or less like how the zone of genius feels. You are energized by doing it. It's not like it's the easiest path and there are no challenges, but it's a different kind of challenge and a different kind of effort than what we're told by, culturally, where we work is hard. You need to like put a lot of effort, and that kind of masculine type of energy, where this is a different type of effort that's giving. It's effort that gives back.
I love that. I love the effortless effort that gives back. That's such a good way to describe that. I was wondering how you were going to differentiate between the zone of excellence and the zone of genius. And so I think that's kind of a perfect way to understand those moments when you're kind of in that zone. And it feels to me too that when people are going through this shift in their lives, it's kind of an invitation to start to pay more attention to those zones because so often we're just going on autopilot, not aware of where our energy is operating in that. And so this is kind of a great invitation for people who are listening to maybe start to identify that a little bit more. Um,
Yeah.
I know you have worked with so many clients and there's so many questions I could ask you, but what is it that makes you feel the most alive, in the work that you do? I'm curious.
So what's my zone of genius?
Sure. Yeah. It's my roundabout way of asking you that.
I think that really there are a few things. Like there is I love that moment where I can see like all the dots connect. With like my clients, we do a lot of different types of exercises and use different types of tools, and we work together over time. And there's always like that moment where it's just amazing. Like it all makes sense and all the dots click together and lead somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like my part of my zone of genius is really kind of connecting those dots for people and like putting those pieces of the puzzles together. And then I think also part of recognizing the zone of genius is also paying attention to what people mirror back to you.
Mm,
And so you can even go and ask, your people who you feel really see you and really kind of know you, but don't have that, let's say, but are not too involved in your life, but like people that you feel are truly see you, and you can ask them like, what do you see as my biggest contribution? And so I know from clients I've worked with, one of the feedbacks I always get is that ability to kind of balance very realistic and practical kind of thinking with the, call it more spiritual or deeper, or like the intuition. So balancing those things, I think that's part of kind of what makes me also come alive, like finding that sweet spot between following our intuition, but also what's practical and what's realistic. And then finally, like the mindset. I love helping people, letting go of stories, shifting the way they see things, challenging their assumptions. Like that really kind of gives me a lot of satisfaction.
yeah. I can see it through the screen, like how joyful that is for you. So I love hearing that response come through. And I feel like that definitely comes through your content as well. And that was one of the reasons I think I was drawn to you was that there's a lot of coaches out there and different things, but you were very down to earth in how you present your content. And at the same time, you embrace the creative side of us. So I love that it's married up, just like what you said, the practical comes together with this really expansive and creative part of ourselves. And that feels really aligned to me, especially at this time. I could just spend so much more time with you, but I want to know from your experience with clients and just all this work and it means so much to you. What what lesson would you love to just let the listeners know, or like what's one thing you wish, you could kind of share with them and let it just absorb into their being?
It's hard to choose one. I think that I have a few. I'm
Sure.
going to say a few.
Yes, please do. Please do.
I think that like, that message of like, you have to get out of your head. It's not helpful to turn a decision around over and over in your head. It's not helpful because it gets you even more into thinking and analyzing. And I guess that connects to the next thing I want to say, that, the big questions about life, they're always actually quite simple. Like, should I take this job, or should I start this business, or should I, whatever that is. The truth is, like, the answer is always quite simple and it's already there. And it doesn't mean like that you don't need to think about, okay, let's say the answer to the question, should I start this business, is the answer is yes. It doesn't mean that you don't need to like plan and think how you're going to do it, and like, have the safety nets that you need to set up, and whatever the strategy is. But the strategy comes after the answer. And I think like that's what I really want to leave people with, is like, listen to that little voice. It's there and you hear it, but you're ignoring it. We all have that voice that tells us like, I really want to do this. And then honoring that voice, and then coming up with the strategy and the plan to back it up, right? But you don't do it the other way around, because if you start with like, yeah, is it realistic and how will I make it work? That's when you like start getting into your head too much.
I love what you said about the strategy comes after the decision. And that's so good. We need to have that like on a t-shirt or something. I think that's so true. I've often, talked myself out of certain things, I'm sure, or whatever, because I start thinking of the how before I've even sat with what is the decision. And so I love what you just shared there. And I bet you see that often.
Yeah, you need to say yes to yourself, and then you have to find the way to make it work. Because yes, if you are going to make a change, it's going to be scary, which means that your mind is going to try and protect you, which means that it's going to bring every reason not to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that so much. That is very good advice for everyone. And I'm so glad we've been able to have this talk. As a closing tradition on this podcast, I ask my guests to leave like a quote or reflection or something for the next guest, not knowing who it is. And so what I love to do is share what the last guest shared. And it doesn't have to be like a perfect quote or anything, just whatever you feel called to share. But my last guest said, she was talking about proximity. And so she said, proximity is not about the numbers. It's not how many people that you're close to. It's about who you're close to. Find who it is that you want to become and find those people to get in proximity with. Find who it is that you are wanting to grow and be, and put yourself in proximity with that room and with those people. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So thought that was a good reflection, and in some ways aligns with what you're speaking to a little bit as well. So I'd love to hear if there's something that you feel called to share.
When you said quote, I thought about like literal, like a
It
literal
could be, yeah.
quote. And the quote that came up for me was like, I think one of my favorites. I mean, I have a lot of favorites. So it's always hard to choose, but I think one that I keep coming back to is by Marie Oliver, which is the tell me what it is that you're going to do with your one precious life, or one wild precious life.
Yeah.
And I think like whenever I find myself afraid of doing something, I come back to that quote. And it just instantly reminds me that we only have one life on this planet. And we don't know even when our one precious life is going to end. And so that idea of like, what is it that I am going to do with it? Because I have a choice. I honestly believe that I can choose to do whatever I want with my life. I really believe that we all have that power to shape it. Yes, we all have circumstances, and I'm not saying that our circumstances don't play a role, but I think we have so much power if we choose to believe that. And so that is the quote that I keep coming back to when I find myself afraid, and I want to remind myself that I only get to do this once, and I want to do it the best I can. And that when I get to that last day, to the end of my life, I don't want to have any regrets of the things that I was too afraid of doing.
Yeah, I love that. I have seen that quote, and it's been a while since I've seen that. And so thank you. That is such a profound reminder. I was just sitting here listening to you saying that and feeling inspired and motivated to look at this a little differently as I approach my own season of embracing what's next. And so I just want to say a huge thank you. I can't really articulate the impact that I think you're having on so many people, and especially in today's world with the job market being what it is. Your work is deeply needed and so valuable. And thank you for being here. I know you could be spending time doing so many other things. And I really appreciate it. And your words mean a lot. So thank you, Naama.
Thank you, Valerie, for giving me this opportunity and for your beautiful reflection.
Thank you for tuning into the show today. And before you go, I just have one quick favor to ask of you. There is a really simple way that you can help support me and help support this show, and that is to hit that follow button on whatever app you're listening to the show on. I'm trying really hard to level up the content and deliver unique value and amazing guests, and just hitting that follow button is the magic that will help continue to empower that. And remember that the world deserves to hear your voice and your stories, and you deserve a place at the top.